things about a lecture recital. The program notes are live. It's based on something called a Dorian scale. And in case you don't know what a Dorian scale is, I've put up back-to-back a natural minor scale and a Dorian scale. So let's all sing together. This is on your handout too if you want to follow it there. Let's all sing the F natural minor scale from La to La. La, ti, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la. The only difference, I know it's tempting to come back down, that's okay. The only difference between the F minor scale and the F Dorian scale is that this Fa, this D flat, becomes Fi, a D natural, and it sounds like this. La, ti, do, re, mi, sol, la. And so as a result, the chorale tune that this motet is based on, take a look at the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th measure. Mi, mi, fi, sol. Now here's something that you should listen for in this motet. There are 5 verses. All of them contain some version of this same chorale tune. So let's sing it together so we know what to listen for. Oh, I love Christ, the inner love, and a better for nearer love. Rise up for him, rise up for souls who dream. So in all 5 verses, you'll hear some version of that. However, one of the really neat things about this piece is that every verse is done in a different historical style, a different musical style, and each one is very sensitive to the text. So, the first verse here uses a technique called for imitation that was common in the Renaissance. It stays in the Dorian mode. In general, it's in a Renaissance style. What does the prefix for mean in German? Before. And so, before the soprano comes in and sings the tune, the basses and tenors imitate it and do a variation on it. Exactly what it sounds like. Now, in the second verse, we see that the words are about a dew pouring down from heaven. And to represent that flowing nature, the basses and altos start out with a real flowing line, while the sopranos come in with the tune, very similar to the chorale motet that we heard before. So the second verse will start out like this. The chorale tune comes in on top of it. That's the second verse. Now the third verse is where it gets very exciting and very daring, so to speak. We have hemiola. We have 2 against 3, triplets against 8th notes. We have a real flowering of the tenor part at the end. And as you can see, we're talking about flowers bursting forth out of the earth. The tenor part sounds like this. It starts out in 3 beats to a measure and then does something called hemiola, where it feels like it's in 2 for a moment. Tenors will sing. O Heiland, 1 and 2 and 3, and then it's back in 3 beats to a measure. That's something very common in the Renaissance, and Brahms does it all throughout his music. He loves to do that. You'll also notice that, as I said, that the tenor got more flowery at the end. It wasn't just schlag aus so er, it was schlag aus so er, more fancy. The 4th verse, very simply, is the most romantic one. Lots of chromatic harmony, and it represents the suffering and the distress that we're going through. And that, again, musically comes through with all those chromatic notes. Then finally, the last one, we want to thank you, we want to praise you, and to show the stability that we now have in our life. It's a very strict canon. So the soprano, for example, starts out like this. And consistently throughout the verse, the bass does an exact inversion of it. When the soprano notes went up, the bass notes go down. And it gets even more intricate at the end during the final amen when the soprano and alto do this. tenor answer, instead of going down, the bass and tenor now go up. Amen. All right, and with that as your background and your program notes, I'll leave this up in case you want to consult the different styles that are going along the way. Enjoy O Heiland, reiss, die Himmel auf. O Heiland, reiss,
vom Himmel gießt, vom Himmel gießt, im Himmel, O Heiland,
notes about this piece after the fact. We've been talking about what pieces Brahms might have known that might have influenced this. Let's listen to a quick excerpt of one. First of all, you'll hear a Dorian scale again, and you'll hear a tenor part that flowers at the end, a piece by Zierler, Die Sonne, die ist verblichen. Here's what the opening tenor tune sounds like.
Die Sonne ist verblichen, die Sterne sind aufgegangen.
That off at the end, that flowering a little bit, just like we saw the flowering of the tenor part in verse 3 of this motet. Dorian mode as well, and in the same way, there is four imitation. So before the tenors do it, the soprano and alto comes in with the same thing. Here's a brief excerpt from this piece. Chamber choir will sit back down for a moment here. And two important pieces to mention. We're not going to really go into depth about them, but two important pieces by Bach to mention here that historians have mentioned a lot. Bach Cantata number 4, which we already experienced and sang a little bit. What's significant about that Bach cantata is it's what's called a variation cantata, meaning that in all 7 verses the same tune appears. And that's what Brahms did here. He used the same tune in each verse, but changed it slightly. And then another important piece, Jesu meine Freude, is a famous motet by Bach where he uses 6 different harmonizations of the same chorale, and he changes it slightly depending on what the text says. The first basic chorale is this. And the next one, as it goes, that's the basic tune, and as he says, the next one, defy the dragon, defy the jaws of death. And what does Bach do there? He defies the meter. You can't tell if it's in 2 beats or 3 beats. Listen. Now it's in 3. Now it's in 2. Wait, where is it? You get lost. You can't find the meter. There's another. Weg mit allen Schatzen, away with all earthly treasure. Saying in principle, however much I suffer, I will not be parted from Jesus. And what happens is, no matter how much rhythmic disturbance there is from the other parts, the soprano stays right on the chorale tune. A lot of rhythmic disturbance. I won't play the other one, but I'll just say that there's another, Gute Nacht, O Wesen, where what happens is to signify that our support is gone as our life is ending. The bases, the support of the choir, the foundation of the choir is gone. And it's just soprano, alto, and tenor that sing. So Bach did that in a very text-sensitive way. Brahms knew the piece, Brahms had the piece, and maybe he was thinking of it when he wrote O Heiland, reiss, die Himmel.